Did some of the biggest shows of the 70s accidentally create their own competition? Back then, a spin-off was supposed to be a gamble, a side character, a borrowed setting, a risky second chance. But a few of them exploded so fast they challenged the parent shows, reshaped network television, and turned minor characters into household names. These are the 70s spin-offs that weren't supposed to dominate, until they did. Benson, 1979 to 1986. He started as the smartest man in someone else's living room, then quietly walked away with his own show. Benson was spun off from the wild, satirical sitcom Soap, where Robert Guillaume's Benson Dubois often stole scenes without even trying. He was calm, sharp, sarcastic, and usually the only sane person in a house full of chaos. That kind of character could have remained a supporting joke forever. But television in the late 70s noticed something important. Audiences were not just laughing at Benson's lines, they were waiting for them. So in 1979, he was moved into a completely new world, working for a governor and dealing with politics instead of family madness. That change could have failed instantly because the tone was different and the setting was riskier. But Benson worked because the character carried authority. He was witty without being silly, serious without being dull, and intelligent without losing warmth. Over time, the show even allowed him to rise in status, turning him from employee into a political figure himself. That gave the series an unusual sense of movement. It was not just a spin-off, it was a promotion. And in a decade packed with loud sitcoms, Benson proved that sometimes the quietest character in the room is the one viewers trust most. Knots Landing, 1979 to 1993. This was the spin-off that moved the drama out of the mansion and into the house next door. When Knots Landing spun off from Dallas in 1979, it could have easily looked like a smaller, weaker cousin. Dallas had oil money, family betrayal, boardroom tension, and the kind of glamorous conflict that made primetime soap opera feel enormous. But Knots Landing made a smarter move. Instead of trying to outdo Dallas with even bigger wealth and louder scandal, it narrowed the camera onto a California cul-de-sac where ordinary-looking neighbors carried secrets just as dangerous as anything happening in a Texas empire. That was the twist. The show made domestic life feel explosive. A dinner party, a marriage, a friendship, or a quiet conversation across the street could suddenly turn into betrayal, heartbreak, or revenge. Viewers stayed because the danger felt closer to home. These were not just millionaires fighting over power. These were neighbors, spouses, and friends slowly revealing who they really were. Over time, Knots Landing became one of the longest-running primetime dramas in American television, outlasting expectations and building its own identity far beyond Dallas. Its success proved that soap opera did not need a palace to feel powerful. Sometimes, all it needed was a locked front door, a smiling neighbor, and a secret waiting behind the curtains. The Facts of Life, 1979 to 1988. A housekeeper left one hit sitcom, walked into a girls' school, and somehow helped launch one of television's most durable coming-of-age shows. The Facts of Life began as a spin-off from Different Strokes, taking Mrs. Garrett, played by Charlotte Rae, from the Drummond household into Eastland, a private boarding school filled with teenage girls, clashing personalities, and growing pains. On paper, it sounded risky. A supporting adult character from one family sitcom was now expected to anchor a completely different kind of series about adolescence, friendship, mistakes, and identity. The early version of the show had a large cast, and it took time to find its real focus. But once the series tightened around its core group, it became something much stronger than a simple spin-off. It gave young viewers characters who felt different from one another. Confident, insecure, rebellious, ambitious, funny, and vulnerable. Mrs. Garrett became the emotional center, not by controlling every story, but by giving the girls a safe place to fail, learn, and grow. That warmth helped the show survive far beyond its original connection to Different Strokes. It became a late 70s launchpad for an 80s institution. The real surprise was not that it lasted, It was that a spin-off built around school problems became a comfort show for an entire generation.
Good Times, 1974 to 1979. This was not just a spin-off. It was a sitcom carrying the weight of real life. Good Times came from Maude, which itself came from All in the Family, making it part of one of the most important family trees in television history. But once the Evans family arrived on screen, the show quickly became its own force. Set in a Chicago housing project, it followed Florida and James Evans as they tried to raise their children with dignity, discipline, humor, and hope, while money was always tight and the future was never guaranteed. That was the secret of its power. The comedy was loud, colorful, and often unforgettable, especially once JJ became a breakout character with his famous catchphrase. But underneath the laughs was something much heavier: working-class pressure, parental sacrifice, racial identity, and the constant fight to stay proud in a system that did not make survival easy. Viewers connected because the show did not pretend family life was simple. It showed arguments, fear, ambition, disappointment, and love under pressure. And even when the tone became broader, the Evans family still felt rooted in something honest. Good Times proved that a spin-off could become more than a borrowed idea. It could become a cultural mirror. Its success came from the fact that audiences weren't just watching characters survive tough circumstances. They were watching them refuse to be reduced by them. Rhoda, 1974 to 1978. She was supposed to be the best friend. Then America decided she deserved the spotlight. Rhoda Morgenstern had already become one of the most beloved characters on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the witty, self-deprecating New Yorker whose sarcasm often hit a softer, more insecure heart. So when Rhoda launched in 1974, the risk was obvious. Could a character who worked perfectly as part of an ensemble carry an entire series on her own? The answer, at least at first, was a thunderous yes. Moving Rhoda back to New York gave the show a fresh emotional rhythm. It was still funny, but it leaned harder into romance, family, independence, and the complicated feeling of trying to build a new life when everyone thinks they already know who you are. The famous wedding episode became a television event, drawing a massive audience and proving how deeply viewers cared about her happiness. That moment turned Rhoda into more than a spin-off. It became a national conversation. The series later faced creative challenges, especially after changing the marriage dynamic that had helped define its early identity. But its initial success was undeniable. Rhoda showed that supporting characters can carry hidden emotional power. Sometimes the person standing beside the star is the one audiences are secretly rooting for all along. Mork and Mindy, 1978 to 1982. A bizarre alien visit on a nostalgic sitcom should have been a one-time joke. Instead, it launched a phenomenon. Mork and Mindy spun off from Happy Days after Robin Williams appeared as Mork, an alien from the planet Ork, whose strange behavior, rapid-fire speech, and unpredictable comic energy made him impossible to ignore. The idea sounded ridiculous. Take a 1950s-style sitcom universe, introduce a space alien, then give him a modern show in Boulder, Colorado. But that absurdity became the hook. In 1978, audiences were hit with something that felt completely different from the controlled rhythm of traditional sitcom comedy. Robin Williams did not simply deliver jokes. He exploded through scenes, turning language, movement, and emotion into a kind of comic lightning. Pam Dauber's Mindy gave the chaos a human center, grounding Mork's innocence, confusion, and wild observations about Earth. The show became an instant rating sensation because it felt like viewers were watching a star being born in real time. Its success was not just about the alien premise. It was about the thrill of unpredictability. You tuned in because you never knew what Williams would do next. Mork and Mindy proved that a spin-off could succeed by breaking the rules of its own origin. It did not feel like a branch from Happy Days. It felt like television had suddenly opened a trapdoor into pure comic madness. The Jeffersons, 1975 to 1985. George and Louise Jefferson did not just move apartments. They moved television into sharper territory. Spun off from All in the Family, the Jeffersons took a character who could have remained a loud neighbor and built one of the most successful sitcoms of the era around him. George Jefferson was proud, stubborn, explosive, ambitious, and often hilariously wrong. But he was also a man who had fought his way into success and refused to apologize for it. Louise, or Wheezy, gave the show its balance: warmth, patience, intelligence, and moral clarity. Their move to a luxury Manhattan apartment created the famous "movin' on up" premise. But the show was never only about money. It used comedy to explore class, race, marriage, prejudice, pride, and the complicated cost of success. That made it feel both entertaining and socially sharp. The neighbors, the housekeeper Florence, and the wider ensemble helped turn the apartment into a pressure cooker of jokes and tension. What made the Jeffersons surprisingly successful was that it did not soften George too much. It let him be difficult, funny, flawed, and human. Audiences kept watching because the show understood something powerful. Success does not erase conflict. Sometimes it just moves the arguments to a better address. That is why the Jeffersons became more than a spin-off. It became a landmark. Laverne Shirley, 1976 to 1983. Two brewery workers walked out of Happy Days and somehow became one of the biggest comedy acts on television. Laverne and Shirley spun off after Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams appeared as Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney, two working-class Milwaukee friends with big personalities, messy dreams, and perfect comic timing. The premise was simple. Two women sharing an apartment, working at a brewery, chasing romance, fighting disappointment, and turning ordinary life into slapstick chaos. But the simplicity was exactly why it worked. Unlike many sitcoms built around polished families or perfect suburban homes, Laverne and Shirley had a scrappy energy. These women were not glamorous social climbers. They were funny, loud, loyal, frustrated, hopeful, and completely believable as best friends trying to make life feel bigger than their paychecks. The chemistry between Marshall and Williams gave the show its engine. Their physical comedy, rhythm, arguments, and sudden bursts of tenderness made every episode feel alive. And the audience responded in a huge way. At its peak, the show became a ratings monster, sometimes outperforming Happy Days itself. That is the rarest kind of spin-off success. Not just surviving the shadow of the parent show, but threatening to eclipse it. Laverne and Shirley proved that television gold can come from the characters everyone underestimates, especially when they have a basement apartment, a factory job, and unstoppable comic timing. These spin-offs didn't just ride the coattails of their parent shows, they outshined them. From breaking sitcom norms to tackling real-world issues, these unexpected hits became cultural landmarks. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts below, hit like if you were a fan, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden gems from TV history.